moving stuff around.
All right, yeah, we're live.
I think we're done.
Welcome to the show.
And we're live.
That's why we go live, baby. Live show action here. Welcome back to the Loopcast. Today joined by Erica and fan favorite recurring guest, Tinfoil Tom McClusky. Tom, thanks for taking the time to come on today.
I'm always happy to be on and honored that I'm in the Josh seat today. So much so I shaved my head and gained a little weight.
Oh, burn.
Whoa.
That's a self-burn. That's a self-burn.
It's true.
Dang, right from the heart. But yeah, what's up to everyone in the chat?
God bless both Josh and I with the same handsome stick.
That's right. So yeah, what's up to everyone in the chat? Happy Friday, guys. If you want to join us live here on YouTube, 11 a.m. Eastern time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We all wore big boy pants today. Erica, did...
I mean,
all right, we're going to move on from that. I wore my big boy pants. We had a big boy press conference that we all got to witness yesterday. Many calling it very high stakes. It was kind of a stamp, hopefully, from the Biden team that, hey, I'm actually functioning. I think we got a saw in the background for you, Tom. All good. So on today's show, we have the big boy press conference. Who, what, when, and where. We got a lot of celebrity pulled endorsements for Biden. So a lot of interesting stuff there. We have the New York Times discovering American Catholicism, always very fun. And then we have Twilight Zone as always, but this time with Tinfoil Tom. So if we get into this press conference, Erica, I know you watched it live. I've seen a lot of clips. I was doing a lot of reading up on it. So what was this press conference and why was it so important that they highlighted this press conference?
Right. So President Biden is coming off hosting the NATO summit, and this press conference came at the close of it. He's been meeting in D.C. with all the leaders of the NATO countries. We had some great footage from Giorgia Meloni of Italy rolling her eyes at one point, which I will never forget. But this press conference was a little bit outside the realm of NATO. He had to do this regardless of whether NATO was happening or not, because this is part of his campaign for proof of life. After that disastrous debate, which we have been covering ad nauseum, because, wow, you can't say enough about what happened there. He sort of had this, what I'm calling the Triple Crown events. So he had a rally in Wisconsin in front of what he's calling thousands of people. That's a questionable number. He had his Stephanopoulos interview, which we covered on Monday, and which was lackluster, but not totally damning. And this live presser last night was sort of the third great event to prove that Joe Biden can and he can be the nominee, he can beat Trump, and he can rule for 4 more years in the seat of the president. In terms of content, which no one was really watching it for, but I'll just go over it briefly. He talked a lot about his work with NATO and all of the treaties that he's made and the strengthening of these relationships, talked a lot about Ukraine. He talked a lot about the 800,000 jobs that he's created. So his basic stump talking points came out over and over again. But once again, that's not why anyone was watching. Everyone was watching to see if he would fall over. And he didn't. Completely. We had a couple of gaffes, though, that I think worth highlighting.
If I could add something quickly, it wasn't part of the emphasis was that he had to do a press conference, as they said, a big boy press conference after the fact where he'd have to answer questions that weren't pre-screened like they usually are?
Yes. Well, I mean, they said they weren't pre-screened. I don't know if you have any theories about that.
Tom, you don't look like you believe that.
I mean, everything is so manufactured, and that this is the bar that we're setting for the president, is that you're coherent for about 45 minutes of the day.
After 8 p.m.
Right, after 8 p.m.
Right. Because, I mean, and all these members of Congress and all who are questioning him, and I know it wasn't invented when Joe Biden was born, except nowadays we have this thing called the phone. So it's just like, of course I'm running, gosh darn it. That's not happening. It's just that we're perpetuating this lie where the nation is about, I think, to be charged for elder abuse. Just that we're allowing this guy to remain president.
At minimum, Dr. Jill should be charged with some elder abuse here. But Erica, you were mentioning gaffes, and you said
there were
stump speeches. Well, it's hard to run against your vice president. There was a clip of him. Do we have the clip?
Trump to be vice president, that I think she was not qualified to be president.
Yeah, calling Trump your vice president. Although I did see a funny take on this. It was like, this probably was true when Joe Biden was alive, that your vice president, the person you run against becomes your vice president.
Back with Jefferson and Adams and all that good stuff.
And the best tweet I saw about it was Vice President Trump should immediately invoke the 25th Amendment. to replace Joe Biden.
That one was tough. And then we get
and this followed on the heels of what was actually even more awkward. So I don't know if we can roll this clip here.
Yeah, do we have that
This was at an earlier event. He was introducing Zelensky.
Now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin.
You can't do that.
Oh, man. And Zelensky's face is just like, whoa.
The one guy. That's the one guy you can't call.
The one guy you shouldn't mess up. Yeah, like you shouldn't call Zelensky Putin. So then, of course, we got a lot of memes immediately all over the internet of Putin shaking hands, or no, Zelensky shaking hands with Trump and Vice President Trump meeting President Putin. It was just, I mean, it was rough. So those are like the two major gaffes of the evening.
Well, and you also have to remember that Zelensky is the highest paid U.S. government employee.
I know, right? Like
forget his name.
But funny enough, from my observations, this seems like somewhat of the worst case scenario. It wasn't enough to really, hit the red alert alarm button for the Democrats. We need to replace him ASAP. But it also wasn't enough of like true, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like that in between, because there's this very obvious Democrat infighting right now. Notably, I think this happened right after we recorded on Wednesday. George Clooney released that op-ed that clearly, I mean, he's very cozy with Obama. He's done a ton of Democrat activism. It was run by him that, hey, I love you, but you need to step down. Likely. I mean, don't listen. People are telling you not to believe your eyes and ears. Believe your eyes and ears. That was a huge high profile one. Another one being, I think this morning, Judd was the last name. I'd never heard of her. She's Ashley Judd.
You're dating yourself, Tom.
Which I've even seen some people like, who cares what celebrities say? People care what celebrities have to say, especially when you talk about a guy like George Clooney, 96% name recognition rate, 60-some% favorable from the public, according to YouGov polls. People care. I mean, this isn't like this goes unnoticed. And then if you even want to go within Congress, what is it, like 14 members of the Democrats have asked him to step down.
It was 12 this morning. Could be more now. Yeah.
And I saw one thing behind the scenes, and Tom, I want to get your 2 cents as you've been on the Hill, but Pelosi basically telling people in tough districts, hey, do what you got to do. If you have to go out and say that he needs to step down in order to keep your seat, you got to do it. She's been very non-committal. And my favorite line that they keep saying is, well, it's up to him. Like, we'll believe he's going to make the best decision, even after him saying for the past week, hey, I'm running. I'm running. Like, well, he'll make the best decision. No, I'm running. Well, he'll make the best decision.
He'll make the decision. Yeah, that was Pelosi.
And this is coming from the 84-year-old Nancy Pelosi, who did have. She should probably step down from Congress as well. So San Francisco, I don't know. I guess they do have the member they deserve, but at least she had the forethought that I'm dated. I should step down as speaker and shouldn't be speaker or minority leader in her case. So she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, people are comparing Joe Biden right now on the left to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who famously hung in there. She would not resign from the Supreme Court. And then she, for the left, inconveniently dies during Trump's presidency. And so she's replaced with Amy
And we
Coney
get the
Barrett.
iconic tiny dancer.
But everything I hear, though, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had her wits about her till almost the very end. Right. It's almost like I heard Thurgood Marshall when he was older that most of his stuff was not written by him. And of course, the most famous with the president, and I'm surprised there's not more stories about it, is Woodrow Wilson, who had a stroke.
And his wife was running
in his second term, and his wife was running things.
Sound familiar?
Exactly.
Edith Wilson.
I don't think Woodrow Wilson had a crack addicted son helping her, but
we can't all be so blessed. Right. I think for me watching it, I actually watched it with my kids because I have my older children, because I was like, this is history, guys. And they were really underwhelmed because really nothing happened. My overall impression was we are just continuing down this very stage managed path that is his cabinet, his inner circle trying so hard to prop him up to keep it going, which I think is a good thing for Trump supporters and for Republicans if he does just like hang in there. Like, let's hope Mercer's right and he is the one on the ballot through November. But at the same time, I just expect it to be this long, slow slog Chinese water torture of people throwing these events, stage managing him down to every sniffle and every shuffle that he makes in order to prop him up and just waiting. You get this sense of the wolves waiting in the wings for him to make a big mess up. But that wasn't last night, bottom line.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the stage manage. Very respected pollster Nate Silver has been one of the people that's probably a little bit on the left that has been pointing out very obvious red flags. And to see Democrats kind of have to deal with this for the first time has been really interesting. One thing he was saying on Twitter was he took a screenshot of what's going on. Back in Washington, there have been clear signs throughout his term of president being increasingly stage managed, as you said, with lists of talking points, names of questions, and drawings of where he should walk presented to him by aides. Ahead of closed-door cabinet meetings that Biden attends, it is customary for cabinet officials to submit questions and key talking points that they plan to present in front of Biden ahead of time to White House aides, two sources with direct knowledge told CNN. The entire display is kind of an act, one of those sources told CNN. They would come in and say, hey, the president is going to call you about 25 minutes in and ask this question. What are the bullet points you'll respond with? The second source, who echoed the same description, said when Biden attends cabinet meetings, they are, quote, not freewheeling and pretty well orchestrated, and the meetings themselves are infrequent, with one cabinet secretary telling CNN they are uncertain of Biden's condition because they so rarely see him.
Right.
And Nate Silver just pointing out the obvious here, this isn't normal or acceptable for an American president. It sounds like a story from an authoritarian country. And pretty reasonable take, I'd say. I mean, I don't think that's unbelievable. And if you go into the comments for him, he's like, I'm unfollowing you. You're now a Trump propagandist. I mean, so it's interesting to see the cracks kind of just starting to form, because people wouldn't dream of saying something like this, even as far as like a couple weeks ago, pre-debate. But I don't even think people would say that.
One thing we should remember, though, with Nate Silvers, who supported Joe Biden to be president, I believe in 2020, with George Clooney's and everything else, it was pointed out to me by a high-level Hill staffer yesterday, the report on Hunter Biden's laptop, in the text messages, it talks about worrying about Joe Biden's dementia and senility. It's something like page 555 or something like that.
And this is pre-2020.
This is like 2018, 2019. Yeah. So this cover-up is, and I'm not putting on my tinfoil hat. I'm not usually, despite the nickname, not usually the tinfoil guy. But I mean, this is widespread cover-up of just how bad his condition is.
But to your point, all the same, and this reminds me, Jon Stewart did a monologue for The Daily Show, and The Daily Show is now doing stuff critical of Joe Biden. All the people that were presenting themselves as these kind of impartial, truth to power, gold standard political satire, they all put him in office, right? Like, this isn't like they all of a sudden came to their senses and are like, wow, he's senile. Like, they knew. They knew all of this behind the scenes, and they were totally fine pushing it. Jon Stewart is, you go back to his Obama days, there's logs of him being in the White House meeting with President Obama. I mean, he's a genuine propagandist, a talented one, no doubt, and very funny. But to me, it just continues to speak like something has shifted. The memo's gone out. It's now open season to criticize Biden. And I think it also speaks to the people always talk about Biden's arrogance or ambition. Like, I think the Biden family, the people around him, truly do not have it within them to relinquish power. I don't think he has the humility. If you look at his career, he's bona fide, ambitious to a fault. He does whatever it takes. I mean, cutting off members of his family, not revealing certain things, influence peddling. I mean, he'll do plagiarizing, anything and everything to get into power. Now that he has it, I don't think his family is going to relinquish it. So it's this interesting, like, rock in a hard place, like an immovable object meets a force. Like, it's just so fascinating to watch. I just get out my popcorn. I can't stop watching, I don't think there's an easy solution.
And in his rare moments of semi-lucidity during this press conference, what was striking me the most is just his complete lack of self-awareness and the insular nature of how he sees himself. Like, I think Biden, again, in his moments of clarity, really sees himself as a great president and really believes that he has made strides for the good of humanity. And that at one point, one of the reporters, and again, watching all of these news reporters who were handpicked by the Biden administration to be allowed to ask questions last night. So this too was stage managed, but even they were pushing on him, like, "Are you fit? Is Kamala Harris ready?" I mean, embarrassing questions, and he just responds. I mean, this was one, they asked him if his team provided to him data showing the vice president doing better against Trump, would he reconsider running? And Biden just does his scary, like, stage whisper lean into the microphone. And he goes,
so
"No,
creepy.
Unless they come back and say there's no way you can win." No one's saying that. No polls are saying that. I'm like, yeah, all the polls are saying that, right? And I
need you to lean more into the creepy on the whisper. That wasn't, that really didn't do it.
I have a hard time being creepy. I'm just not.
I don't think you have it in
creepy.
you, Erica. Yeah, you don't have it in you, unfortunately. Tom, you got a whisper attempt you want to give us, or what's up?
I want you to listen to me. I'm the best president there's ever been. If you need me to read childhood bedtime stories to your kids, just let me know.
Yeah, you're available for contract, right? Your contract
exactly.
Bedtime story reader.
That's great. Good to know.
Yeah. We'll see with this going forward. Tom, do you have any? I mean, being on the Hill, like, the sentiment's got to be pretty tense, I'd imagine, on the Democrat aisle.
Well, for most of this year, there's been like controversy, like because the Republicans, it's kind of been a mess, a new speaker and things like that. Except it was messy, but it was democracy in action.
Right.
It is so nice to sit back and grab the popcorn and see the Democrats imploding like this and kind of being anti-democratic. I mean, they've gone through a primary system. They wanted to go with this guy. They picked this guy for some strange reason, knowing this guy was senile in 2020. They picked the worst possible vice presidential candidate who would have to fill in. I think she was probably picked by the Biden family, knowing that Joe Biden will remain president because everybody hates Kamala Harris more. They'd rather have a senile Joe Biden than I don't want to use the word coherent because that's too strong a word for Kamala, but Kamala Harris as president. So
that's some 4D chess right there.
For a lot, I think the Republicans are trying to be very disciplined and just sit back. And if your enemy is imploding, just sit back and watch the show.
Grab the popcorn. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So Tom, and before we get into your time at NATCON, you have some books behind you, right?
Mm.
Yes, I do. And for God, Country, and Sanity, a wonderful book, except for the exception of one chapter, maybe, but it's passable. And actually, on my panel at NATCON, I was with one of the other authors, Mary Margaret Olahan.
Oh, fire!
Legend.
So she is fantastic, as are most of the chapters in there.
Highly recommend. Actually, we had shout out to he wrote an article for the Catholic thing. All he did was Meyrat, Meyrat, I believe, wrote us a good review. So if you want to check out this book, I highly recommend. It's very it's an easy read. It's very digestible. We have great authors, as we're bringing up. You can do so at the Catholic Vote store. You can find that book. Highly recommend. It's behind me here. It's behind Erica there. Tom, great job on your chapter. But moving forward here, so you actually spoke at NATCON. We've continued to get emails about the RNC party platform, dropping the pro-life plank. It's continuing to be a tough issue. We kind of covered, sitting back and watching the enemy implode here. But we obviously have some problems on our side too. So Tom, when you were speaking at NATCON, what did you talk about? What was the feeling about the pro-life issue? It
was a Dobbs panel, and also on the panel, it is some of the three smartest or most talented people in DC. It was Katie Talento, who was in Trump's White House domestic policy office. She is a healthcare expert extraordinaire. She was talking about regulations and which ones we need to get rid of. Emma Waters, who's a heritage, and she's just brilliant. I usually describe her as she's not Catholic, but she's smart enough to be. And she was talking about pronatal philosophy. And then, of course, Mary Margaret Olahan. She was talking a lot about the war, basically the war on kids. And she's got a new book out too, Detrans, that I'm looking forward to read.
Yeah.
I was more to talk about the post-Dobbs and like where the pro-life movement was. And I couldn't ignore what had happened over the past week. And especially the platform, to me, I know a lot of people don't care about it as much. I've worked on it since 2004, trained under Phyllis Schlafly from Eagle Forum, who's an icon. All of us in the pro-family movement stand on her shoulders. Except the plank in the pro-life plank in the Republican platform is there because of Phyllis Schlafly. And there's no denying it was watered down. That is shortened, I'm perfectly fine with, but it was watered down and it was very poorly written, in my opinion. When I was in Wisconsin, I was sitting next to an attorney from Alliance Defending Freedom, constitutional attorney, and they took one look at it and just said, this makes no sense. The 14th Amendment applies only to some states, but not other states. So it was just poor. I know what they were trying to attempt to do. It was poorly written. And at NATCON, when I said that this was the worst platform I ever saw, I got a very loud ovation. Except to show the contrast as well, later in my talk, I mentioned how Donald Trump, because of his record, is the most pro-life president in my lifetime. That also got just as much loud applause, all from the same people.
Really interesting.
So people understand that for the pro-life movement, we have a lot of work to do, and we knew that, even with our allies like Donald Trump. But they also understand that the best path forward is a Trump presidency. I don't know if we could recover from a second term of a Biden or Biden adjacent presidency.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that perspective. I think that's really helpful. And it honestly cuts through to, I think, where a lot of people feel. And because I've gotten so many emails, we've gotten so many tweets, I see it all over the place. Like there's definitely a small camp of people that are now just like, I'm gone. Like I'm just going independent. I'm throwing up my hands. We're not dealing with this. And then there's the other camp of people that are just like, I'll follow Trump wherever he goes. I'd say the vast majority of Catholics are falling somewhere in that area of, we're so happy he overturned Roe v. Wade. That was a humongous victory. He is the most pro-life president we've had in our lifetime, but also very disappointed to see this move. But I think you brought up hopefully where we can all land on is, you understand probably better than most, we can't survive another Biden administration from a country perspective, but for sure not from a pro-life perspective. I mean, we were looking at the Democrat plank of their platform. It's unbelievable how radical and different that is from what's being presented from Republicans.
But you don't reelect a president just because he's better than the other guy.
For sure.
Right.
It's harder to win that way. The people, like as I said on the panel, was Katie Talento, who was in the White House Domestic Policy Office. The good stuff that came out from HHS mostly came from, not really from HHS, they came from her office, her and a guy named Andrew Bremberg. Other people like Russ Vogt, who had a very heavy hand writing the Republican platform. He was OMB director under President Trump. Hopefully he will be again. These are all very solid pro-life people that will be in the next administration. And while I don't want to use those evil words of Project 2025, except that is not a bad blueprint to follow. I would endorse Project 2025. But I understand why President Trump wouldn't, because the President Trump presidency is going to be the Trump presidency. Right. It's not going to be the heritage presidency. And even Kevin Roberts would agree to that. And he has said that.
I heard under Project 2025 that they're going to bring steroids back to baseball. So that sounds pretty
and pineapple on pizza. So
and the good Happy Meal prizes at McDonald's, like the good ones.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds
cocaine back in Coca-Cola. So you know, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, putting the Coke back in Coca-Cola. Project 2025 is going to be unreal. It's gonna mandate White Boy Summer. I heard. We're getting rid of some Pride holidays. It's gonna be sick. Speaking of, we have a fun Ben Shapiro clip. And
this is great.
Tom, you hang out in Congress, like you're around. I watch these interviews where they bring in people in front of congressional panels, and I don't know if like Eric Swalwell thinks like, man, I'm really gonna sound sick here. Like I have all my questions here. You bring in Ben Shapiro and you get this result. I think we can all just experience it together. Do we have that clip? I think we have that full video. I'm not sure the clip got put in there. But yeah, Erica, do you have a little background on why he was there to begin with?
Yeah, so interesting. He wasn't even there to talk about Project 2025, as you'll see in the clip once we grab it. He was there. Ben Shapiro was called to the Judiciary Committee to testify about GARM, which I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but it's an advertising firm that basically it's the forum that is intended to provide brand safety in advertising for all these big media companies. So for Fox, so basically, if you have a big company and you want to advertise on Fox or CNN or Daily Wire, you go to GARM and GARM tells you, okay, if you advertise with these people and pay them money, it's going to be great for your brand, or it's going to be horrible. And this is it's like the W path of advertising, massively influential. And of course, GARM, these guys are testifying that they pretty consistently tell people not to advertise with platforms like the Daily Wire, the Daily Caller, Breitbart, all the conservative platforms. One of the guys was like, "Oh, but we do advertise on Fox, so we are friendly to conservatives." You're like, "No,
don't brag about that." Yeah.
That was founded in the 90s, and it's not even so. But that was why Ben was there, was to testify, because Daily Wire uncovered all this collusion going on between GARM, federal organizations. It's all very incestuous and ugly.
Yeah.
But Swalwell had a different plan. He was thinking, you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to show Ben Shapiro my debating skills. And it did not go as he planned.
Mr. Shapiro, thank you for joining us today. I think it is important that you're here as one of the leading conservative voices in the country. And the country has, in the last couple of weeks, talked a lot about and Googled Project 2025. It's one of the most Googled.
Which has nothing to do with GARM.
Search terms right now. Right. And you're not going to get any censorship from me. So I just wanted to know, from your perspective, I think it would help us understand, on just like a scale of 0 to 100%, how much do you support Project 2025?
I think, like President Trump, I haven't looked all that deeply at Project 2025, but it seems that Democrats on this committee, sort of like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, if they say Project 2025 enough, their presidential candidate becomes alive again.
And so, well, let's just talk about pieces of it, and I guess you can tell me if you support it. You probably want less bureaucracy, right?
I do.
I want less bureaucracy. You want more efficiency?
I do.
I want more efficiency. You want taxpayer money spent wisely?
I do. Congrats on becoming a Republican.
Yeah. Yeah. My parents would be proud.
Let me see if I can find Elizabeth. Yeah. I'm going to send you the clip from basically. So obviously not a great start to Swalwell's questioning here. And it almost felt like he's like a little Johnny Cochran. Like he's like, I'm going to ask these like prosecutorial questions, like I'm in the grand courtroom or whatever, and I'm going to get OJ off. But he started asking him about what he thought was a sin and what wasn't a sin. And I actually really want to highlight that, because this goes beyond GARM. It goes beyond 2025. Is like the way he was asking these questions were clearly an attempt to tie people's religious views with their palatability in society and ability to advertise. I mean, honestly, pretty scary stuff. So
the Jewish dogma lives loudly in Ben.
Yeah, seriously. And it's like really a bizarre line of questioning. One of the things he was asking about is whether or not he thought that homosexuality was a sin.
Right.
And Ben Shapiro just goes, okay, you got me. Like, I'm a Jew. Like, you outed me as a Jew. Like, you're just saying baseline Orthodox Jewish beliefs. And then he pulled up this placard behind him with a quote on what he said homosexuality. I was like, yes, I agree with what I said. Like,
I agree with me.
Tom, would you say, like, when these people go into questioning, do they think they're going to look better than they do? Like, what's going through most of their minds?
Look, if you're getting elected, at least 100,000 people said, "Hey, I like you," and that boosts your ego. And if you noticed when Eric Fang Swalwell was speaking, if you looked at the audience, or not in the audience, except all those empty seats, because most members of Congress, it's all theater now. Right. About 15 years ago, I testified before the House Judiciary Committee. I was the Catholic testifying for the evangelical organization on an issue of internet gambling. And it was basically because they literally could not, last minute, they could not find anybody else. The person canceled. And I'm the only person testifying on behalf of against internet gambling. And Steve Cohen, a congressman from Tennessee, does almost the exact same thing. He starts going, so does Family Research Council oppose poker? And I'm like, or he goes, do you oppose poker? And I go, Family Research Council opposes poker. Because, I mean, we're Catholics. We're okay with a little bit of gambling. And he just goes, so do you oppose horse racing? And I'm like, Family Research Council opposes horse racing. He goes through about 3 or 4 of those. Then finally he goes, well, what do you do for fun? And that was supposed to be his punchline. So I interrupted him and I go, well, I used to think hearings were fun. and John Conyers was the judiciary chair at the time. Democrats were controlling. And I see John Conyers laugh a little bit. And then I told him, because this was actually 17 years ago, right before I got married, I said, I'm about to get married in 6 months. If you want, after I get married, I can ask my wife what I think is fun or not and come back and tell you. So the whole committee starts laughing except for Steve Cohen. After the hearing, John Conyers, the Democrat, came up to me to tell me, you were great, I loved you. And because they're just not used to people talking back in that way. And because I just approached it that I'm never going to testify anything again, because as a lobbyist, you're an expert on nothing. You know everything, you're an expert on nothing. Mm-hmm. So except that's just the members of Congress. Even our friends, they just have a little bit of ego. And I like to think sometimes that part of my job is deflating that ego even among our friends sometimes. Good-naturedly, but Eric Swalwell, though, is all ego.
Well, yeah, I mean, do we have to talk about the Chinese spy situation? Like, I really wouldn't be talking about sexual immorality when you are known for fraternizing with the enemy. But would you say your advice then, so Tom gets pulled in front of the Congressional committee. You're saying they just are not used to getting pressed back on, so you're saying kind of have fun with them.
Because a lot of people, and this is probably I wouldn't recommend everybody take the same tactic I did, but Ben Shapiro is an expert at this. He is an expert spokesperson. He articulates his views very, very well. But if Congress really is just going to start using you as a prop, don't stand for it if you're testifying. Otherwise, treat it with respect. Treat them with respect. We're talking about American law, and this is a body. Congress is a body of laws. But if you realize you're just going to be treated as a prop, you shouldn't sit there and take it as an American citizen, because an elected official does not have any more powers or rights than you do.
Mm-hmm.
Say that again for the camera. They might think they do.
They sure do sometimes. Well, and I think like watching Ben Shapiro here, some people were complaining that he crossed the line into being, disrespectful. But like, I mean, this is his brand. But I think what he was picking up on with his comment about Peter Pan and Tinkerbell is this Project 2025 scare that is just, this is clearly an attempt to dangle the shiny thing for Democratic voters and be like, Project 2025 is going to send us back into, Plymouth, Massachusetts, 1622. And I think Ben was picking up on just the ridiculousness of the fact that he's at this hearing. Every single Democrat questioning him is going on and on about 2025. And he's like, the only way to combat this is to show the ridiculousness of it and to mock it, right? It's at a certain point, mockery is all that's left.
Should we get someone from Project 2025 on the Loopcast?
Yeah.
I feel like that'd be kind of sick.
Anyone Heritage would be fun.
We would have like public enemy #1 on the Tom. I think we could kind of make that happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know Roger Severino would probably love to come on. He heads up their policy and is very involved with Project 2025. There's a whole bunch of people over there that I know would love to come on and explain the myths and facts, and probably also have a little bit of fun with some of the
I got questions.
Some of the stuff that's out there that mocking.
I'm gonna go find like the most extreme accusations of Project 2025 and ask them to their face. I can make a whole episode of that, pretty much.
You could. Go on the Hill.
One thing that people aren't doing, though, the press, because of course they don't believe in a balanced press, is that this happened. Heritage has been doing this since 1980. They originally did this for Ronald Reagan. It is much more larger scale this time around, but Heritage started it. In the last few elections, the other side does as well. There's a group like Repro Action that works with Planned Parenthood, Human Rights Campaign, and everybody else that puts together, this is what the next administration is going to do. So I think a lot of this attacking Project 2025 is jealousy that Heritage is doing it so well.
It's a little mean girl envy on the Hill.
Exactly. Oh, please. It's Capitol Hill invented Mean Girls.
We're definitely doing this. We're getting on the horn after this episode. I'm talking to someone from Project 2025. That's going to be fun. Okay, before we get into Twilight Zone here, we have a little church corner. So first off, we have kind of a quick update. This came across the desk yesterday. So the Knights of Columbus are officially going to cover Rupnik art at Headquarters Chapel, the JP2 Shrine. This comes after a lot of controversy as we've covered on the program, even so far as people within the Vatican going at length to defend Rupnik and his art, saying, who am I to judge? Would this bring me close to the abusers? Yada, yada, yada. Controversial in art spaces as well, but it looks like the Knights of Columbus have stepped up here and are going to cover it up until we go through a full investigation. How do we feel about that?
Oh my gosh. I was so happy.
I'm not surprised that the Knights are leading the way. I'm glad they are. Patrick Kelly, the current Supreme Knight, was my boss's boss when I was at the March for Life, but I got to know him well there. He was chairman of the board, and he was in charge of the shrine, which has a lot of Rupnik art in it. So I'm sure from the very beginning he prayed about this and thought about this, and I am not surprised at all that they're leading the way, and hopefully the rest of the church follows their lead as well. And as Josh keeps on saying, or maybe it's you, Tom, this is just ugly art to begin with.
That's Josh.
Taking a sandblaster to it and letting a 6-year-old put something up instead would probably be much better.
That sounds like Josh rhetoric. Yeah, for sure. I can't claim that. Someone said they're.
I think they're lying.
Someone emailed in. They thought that one of Josh's lines went unappreciated on an episode. Shout out to Amanda. She said, I just have to say, Josh's line about peeing in navy pants may feel good, but no one is going to know is absolutely hysterical. So few opportunities to use a niche line like that in everyday conversation. And what an appropriate and hilarious moment he was able to seize. I know it's like they're lying will likely be on his tombstone, but peeing in navy pants should be considered.
That's awesome.
Josh is making waves.
That's right. The potty humor is always a winner.
So funny.
Yeah, but I really appreciated the statement coming out of the Knights, and I know that they took so much time. It felt like a long time, but they were saying how they consulted victims of sexual abuse, people who minister to them, moral theologians, art historians. I mean, they covered the gamut before making this decision. And I really, really appreciate Kelly's line, especially that shrines are places of healing, prayer, and reconciliation. They should not cause victims further suffering. And I'm like, no, duh. Thanks for doing the right thing. So continue that and take a note, Lords, Center of Healing.
I was going to say, they did it before the Vatican.
Our Lady. Yep, let's do it.
American Church leading as always. Speaking of the American Church, so we get an article from the New York Times. Headline, America's New Catholic Priests, Young, Confident, and Conservative. In an era of deep divisions in the church, newly ordained priests are overwhelmingly lean right in their theology, practices, and politics. Of course, this is the New York Times. This is a little bit of a petri dish treatment by saying lean. I don't even know what leaning right in their theology means. I think they're probably referring to orthodoxy. Politics may be fine if you want to survey them on their political beliefs, but that was one thing I noticed about the article is they used this right-wing, right-leaning to apply to church teaching, which I thought was probably inappropriate, but I think people probably get the gist. A lot of cool elements to this article. I mean, this picture right here is at from Archbishop Jerome Lisecki near the end of the ordination service held at the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist in Milwaukee. Actually, I don't know. I don't think he listens, but I know a seminarian there now. I actually think I know a few. And I remember I went there, and if you scroll down, there is another follically challenged priest there, Father Luke Strand, who actually was very kind, greeted me at the seminary, really cool guy. And one thing before we get into this whole thing, like if you keep scrolling down in a lot of these pictures, they have him playing cornhole. There was this sentiment about like, I think I have the article here. It says St. Francis de Sales, great seminary up in Milwaukee, has become a place where young men experience a deep sense of fraternity, Father Strand said. On Saturday nights, the men watch sports together, play basketball in the gym, bowl in the seminary's small alley, promotional videos for the seminary, introduce students like football recruits. I did see that. It was hilarious. It becomes really attractive for a young man to say, boy, am I called to this? There are a lot of normal guys here. The idea of normalcy, quote unquote, looms large in Catholic seminaries in the long wake of revelations of widespread sexual abuse in children and young adults by clergy over decades. I think Josh talked about this a lot, and it probably doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, when I was there, you see some real, like, normal is the word that gets used, but like masculine young men set on their cause, understanding their vocation, there for the right reasons. And I wasn't really alive for a lot of this, not to be the one to talk about it too much, but the idea of there being this kind of lavender mafia, pink palaces, where there was just very open homosexual culture going on there. I think they even mentioned in the article that they do some psychoanalysis of the sexual state of seminarians coming in to make sure that they're in a good place. And it's very unsurprising to me when you get people like this together that they're going to be orthodox, that they're probably going to be right-leaning. I mean, we're talking about young men, probably full of testosterone, ready to lead the future of the church. Many of these young guys were just, I'm excited. Like, the world is Catholic. I'm ready to go take that to the world. So cool. So much of this just really inspired me with my first thoughts. But Erica, Tom, upon reading this, what really stuck out to you guys?
Yeah, I really I appreciated the coverage because although some of the terminology like right-leaning in their theology is obviously kind of an outsider's point of view, I really did appreciate the sympathy with which they were portrayed. So it's definitely worth a read. One of the quotes here that I wanted to point out, today's young priests don't see themselves as a conservative insurgency, which is how even among Catholics, the Catholic left really is characterizing these studies and these reports coming out of the Catholic Project as, oh my gosh, we have an insurgency of conservatives. But the article says they don't see themselves that way, but rather as part of a new generation who embrace difficult church teachings rather than soft pedaling them in what they see as the misguided pursuit of big tent evangelism. And that's a really subtle point for the New York Times to be peddling there.
For sure.
That we are, what they're talking about, these guys are not going into the seminary for reasons of like, they've been characterized as nostalgia. And I think Michael Sean Winters has a quote in here where he's like, I'm concerned that they're all looking back at the past and not at the future. Whereas actually
but even he kind of pulled, and for people that don't know, Michael Sean Winters, infamous left-leaning Catholic political figure.
He's been around a long time.
Yeah.
But then there's this quote from one of the young priests, Father Sweeney, and he goes, talking about marriage, that's a core tenet of our faith that our culture has shifted drastically on in the last 12 years. If we're saying that we hold to eternal truth, something that's changeless and the world changes, well, now I guess I've changed in my relation to the world. And another priest added, maybe we're more conservative now because the culture moved, not because we moved. And I'm just like, yes, preach it, Father. And for them to come to the priesthood, seeing themselves in that way, that they're returning to the eternal revealed truth of Jesus Christ, rather than, oh, we're some reactionary group of like, rightist, I don't know, north of Richmond kind of reactionary thing. That's not who we are. We're just lovers of Jesus Christ and want to bring this to the world. Great sense of hope for the Catholic Church in the United States going forward. So this was a real pick-me-up. Everyone should go check it out.
For sure.
I do think, Erica, you touch on something, because I see it a lot here on Capitol Hill or in DC, because with the different groups, they try to decide if they're right or left. And then the Catholic Church comes along and they're like, well, is it right or it's left? And it's like, well, what issue are we talking about? Because even though we use the terms, right and left really isn't applicable to the Catholic Church. And if we want to, even though we use that rhetoric sometimes, if we want to be honest about it, it's about those who live up to the truth and stand up for the truth, those kind of Catholics, and bad Catholics. Those who do not, those who think that Catholic teaching is not eternal and is a living, well, it is a living teaching, But just as they think there's a living constitution, they think that the teachings of the church need to evolve with the times. So just I love just seeing all this resurgence. And one of my favorite parts, it used to be when the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, the night before the March for Life, would have a big, huge mass, a life mass, the night before the march. In the seminary, they would have a march of the bishops would come first, then all the priests, and then the seminarians, and it would take about 45 minutes, 50 minutes, because there were just so many. And I would tear up just about every time to be like, okay, even in the darkest times, with leaders like these in the church, I have hope.
Yeah, no question. There's so many cool videos that have been going around too of newly ordained seminarians like coming out after the mass, just giving each other big hugs. Like you could just feel the energy there. And I think as the culture continues to move away from kind of what has been normal, I think if anything, we're just going to get an increase in vocations and fervor and things like that. Because I was just talking to someone talking about being a missionary, going to Africa, and people that they don't need, if anything, we need missionary from them, right? Because they don't suffer from a spiritual death. They're suffering from real physical death. They understand the stakes. And I see the biggest problem here, I think, is just a real spiritual decay or real spiritual despair, or even just feeling kind of hopeless. Like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what's going on. I just don't feel good. And the more that Catholicism is offered as the answer to that question, in a real attempt to deliver Jesus to the masses through sacraments, through the Eucharist. Of course, we have this Eucharistic Congress coming up. Eucharistic adoration is a huge part of this. But the guys that get to deliver that, like the boys who are going to become men, who already are men, I'm just calling them boys, but seminarians are a huge part of this.
You're what, 26?
Yeah. But it's funny. I think about that. Like, I know guys my age who are in the seminary right now getting pretty close to that, where they're going to become a priest. And I'm like, that just really excites me to think about young guys. Like, I don't want to use like weird language, but like young testosterone-filled like men, like ready to take on big challenges, like ready to serve their communities, like ready to play a large role. Like they feel purpose. They're filled with it. Like you can just see it in these ordination videos. I just saw one of a priest crying, giving his parents his blessing right after becoming ordained. Like how powerful. Like these are really powerful sentiments that we're talking about here. Here's the one of the boys hugging after, like, come on, how sick is that? That's like a dream come true. That was literally like, after I got married, I'm going out and giving my friends hugs like this. Like, this is the equivalent. Like, you're living your vocation to the fullest. It's so cool.
Yeah, I love this video. Of the guys coming out. I think it's a little foretaste of what heaven's going to be like.
It is like after a football game.
Yeah, right.
Which is what heaven will be like. Like after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. Yeah, after I win.
Chiefs? What are you talking? You're from New England. You can't just pivot because the Patriots aren't good.
Dude, you told me to predict the Super Bowl winner, so I did.
Yeah, but you're a little too attached now. It's like, okay, that was last year, New Year.
I'm wearing my
Don't
red.
worry, the Lions are about to be a problem this year. Before we get into the Twilight Zone, I also want to give a special shout out. So, Jessica, while we're doing this, can you pull up a picture of Sweetest Heart of Mary Church in Detroit? So it turns out, I mentioned it last episode. I mentioned it a few times. I love this church. I grew up going there. This church, Sweetest Heart of Mary, I get an email from parishioners there about me mentioning it. It said, hello, Tom. I'm a new listener to the Loopcast, and I really enjoy your show. You mentioned Sweetest Heart of Mary Church on your last podcast. Thank you for doing that. Yes, Sweetest Heart of Mary Church was built in the Polish cathedral style, grand and beautiful. My wife and I run the bakery booth at Sweetest Heart of Mary Pierogi Festival. Feel free to give the festival a mention on one of your upcoming shows. This year, the festival will be on August 9th, 10th, and 11th. Attached is a flyer for the festival. Also stop by the bakery booth if you plan on attending the festival to meet us. I don't know if I'll be up there the 9th, 10th, and 11th, but I have gotten pierogies from this festival in my lifetime, and they're phenomenal. They know what they're doing there. They got the right Polish people in the right places. It's unbelievable. So first off, shout out to Mark and Lori. Sweetest Heart of Mary is absolutely breathtaking. If you're in the Detroit area, you should definitely visit it. One of my favorite churches of all time. So I just thought it was cool. We reached someone from the festival. So maybe they're listening to this one. Hope so, but it's stunning.
Maybe they can name a pierogi after you. The Pogory.
The Pogory.
I don't think I have any Polish in me, unfortunately, but I'm a respecter of the culture for sure.
I'm a wannabe Pole. I have Lithuanian, and we just call ourselves the wannabe Poles.
Yeah, there's no good food over there.
It's my wife who's of Polish and Hungary descent. So
all right. Get your pierogies. Check out
Get your
Detroit.
pierogies. Get your pierogies. All right. So we move on to the Twilight Zone now. Mine's kind of long.
Well, I'm going to drink my coffee then while you go off on that one.
Okay. So I'm going to go first. So I don't know if you can pick up over the recording. Sometimes it's fun to talk about the mental ability of the leader of the free world. Most of the time it's not. And honestly, frustrating situation, interesting, but it feels like a big distraction from a lot of other failings of the Biden administration. And one of them I was acutely reminded of. So there's a few parts to this story, but the crux is that the immigration situation, of course, is unprecedented and out of control. I'm not sure if you guys remember the kids in cages trope used against President Trump. This unaccompanied minor problem actually dates back to the early 2000s, got pretty bad under Obama. So it's not a new problem per se, but it's a very politicized issue. So there was a couple whistleblowers that came out, and it got picked up by the New York Times, basically asserting that there's 85,000 unaccompanied minor aliens missing in the country. This all directly falls under the Health and Human Services Department in the ORR. The ORR is the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So this all happened about a year ago. I think it was maybe in February, so a little bit longer. It was in 2023. So these federal employees that blew the whistle on, hey, we don't know where these kids are in the country, they came forward to an unofficial get-together because the Democrats that control the Senate refused to cooperate. So we have Senator Grassley, Bill Cassidy, Ron Johnson, and John Cornyn. We're holding an unofficial get-together with some of these whistleblowers to get the stories of what's going on. So I'm going to do my best to tell the story here. As you know, the crux of it is that there's 85,000 missing kids. So this was after this report from the New York Times. The article states that in 2022, there were 130,000 unaccompanied minors who entered the U.S. This was 3 times what it was 5 years earlier. And so what happens is the Office of Refugee Resettlement, their whole job is to place these minors with sponsors in the country that they're hopefully related to, but sometimes not. And obviously have a big job here because we have just this influx of minor children. The reason we have this is because the whole Trump kids in cages thing was basically a campaign point for the Biden administration. So they're doing their best to get kids out of custody as quick as possible, to not be accused of the same things they accused Trump of doing, which was keeping kids in cages. Which, if you want to get, I'm not even going to get into all that. Basically, it's somewhat of a hoax. It's not really the real truth. But what is happening is kids used to spend 105 days on average with the ORR. The Biden administration has done everything it can to get that number total down. It's now down in the 20s, I think about 25 days. Now, you're not probably going to love the ways that he's done that. So the ways that he's done this is by cutting background checks, background check requirements for the sponsors. So what's happening now is kids are being placed with people that they don't know anything about. He's also cut the biometric and biographic information sharing agreement between ORR and the Department of Homeland Security that Trump put in place. The idea being, we want all the information possible that people are being placed with. Are they a terrorist? Are they in a gang? Do we know anything about them? Biden cut that in order to move people along quicker. So what's happening now is many of these sponsors are unrelated and have no pre-existing relationship with the children. What's worse is people within the Biden administration, while this is going on, we're sounding the alarm on this, saying, hey, I think we have an example from this lady, Tara Lee Rodas. She had a 20-year career. She flagged a kid because he was being sent to a known MS-13 gang member. We never saw the sponsors face-to-face, and fake documents were rampant. When we questioned documents, the ORR leadership said, you are not a fake ID expert, and your job is not to investigate the sponsor. Your job is to reunify the child with the sponsor. So they're basically washing their hands of everything that happens after. So some examples of problems. There was an example where 300 kids were sent to one address. The there are examples of kids being sold into child pornography. There's plenty of examples of kids being sold into child labor with members of gangs, with members of cartels, not with family members. This 85,000 number comes with, they call about a month later and try to see, hey, are we in contact with whoever we sent them to? And in many cases, they weren't able to reach the child. So there's plenty of these examples of, we called them, couldn't find out where they were, but they do have a database of where they were sent. So they were sent all over the country to these sponsors, but no actions being taken on this database to go. They were American citizen, Child Protective Services, someone would be involved. But because that's at the state level and the HHS maintains that their stance is, that's not our job. Our job is to get them out as quick as possible to these places across the country. So in the report also, they interviewed these kids who are working in factories, farms, all over the country, child labor, sweatshop labor everywhere. The numbers are just shocking, staggering. And the whistleblower said they were all retaliated against by members of the Biden administration because they were trying to blow the whistle on, hey, what we're doing here is, evil to the fullest extent. So the funny thing is, this is all going on around questions about Biden's mental state, but this unofficial press conference happened. It was open to the press. Only 2 members of the press showed up. Shout out to Luke Rosariak over at the Daily Wire. He was one of them, got a lot of this information, much being swept under the rug here, but really just unconscionably evil. And unfortunately what happens too is with the ORR, they are sending the kids to transportation services like contractors to go to their then ending site, many of which of these contractors are either funded by public money, so your taxpayer money is going to them, and there's very little accountability as to whether or not they're handing them off to cartel, et cetera.
Well, and again,
scary.
just the contrast of the media silence around this, that the Daily Wire, which Ben Shapiro was defending in Congress on the Hill during that hearing, that they're only 2 reporters show up to a story like this. This is a massive story. 85,000 kids and its children being abused, and the media, CNN, MSNBC, they couldn't get enough of this when it was the kids in cages story with the Trump trope. But now that it's under the Biden administration, everyone's like, oh, dangly shiny thing. George Clooney said something, outrageous, and Nancy Pelosi is over here, and all this like ruling elitist class. And you're like, there are children out there dying and being exploited, and no one's covering it. Like, the silence on this is just absolutely staggering. And so late stage republic. Like, we're all Soviets now. Yep, you were right.
The media completely operates like the problem.
And it's not just the kids in cages either. Under the Trump administration, friend of Catholic Vote, Scott Lloyd, was head of ORR. And he was called before Congress to testify, and he was being lambasted in the press because there were about 300 kids that were unaccounted for. And rightfully so. No kid should be unaccounted for.
Right.
But now we're talking 85,000 and just crickets. And it just shows that I'm sorry, the left do not care about children. They want to sterilize them. They want to kill them. They don't care what, they want to use them as props, but they don't care about children.
Yeah. Even Erica, you brought this up, but just, I was like, we were all alive when every news story in a 24-hour cycle was about the kids in cages. Mm-hmm. Every news story, like it was almost like ridiculous. Like there was nothing else they were covering.
No, I had Catholic friends call me and be like, how can you possibly support Trump? He's keeping kids in cages. And like, I still have friends who hate Trump because of that one story. And this is just...
And somehow getting them out quicker into the hands of cartel is a better solution. all for political expediency.
And if I remember, some of those pictures were actually from the Obama administration.
Yeah, they were actually.
Well, they were. He was, because he actually dealt with the first surge. Like, I think it was an issue going back to 2002, but he dealt with the first surge of unaccompanied minor children. Like, what do we do with these children? They've been dropped off by coyotes. They're not with their families. We need to find a way to like reunify them, which of course is a huge problem. But then under Biden, the numbers just, they almost numb you a little bit, like how crazy the amount of numbers of people coming across is. So yeah, I just thought that not a fun Twilight Zone, but I could not believe, I kept reading into this and I just could not believe what I was reading.
People need to know about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for highlighting.
Yep. Erica?
Well, I'll try and bring it up a little bit after that. So basically, we talked about Jon Stewart doing his little heel turn pivot there. The Daily Show is struggling a little bit with this new reality. And the Daily Show has other reporters, quote unquote, and one of them did a focus group with Black voters from New York, and it did not quite go as planned. I don't know if we can get that video up there, Jessica.
Yeah, we have that clip, right, Jessica?
Yeah,
Biden
right
does.
there.
Has Biden issued an apology for the things that he's been caught saying?
He said, if you don't vote for me, you're not black.
You're not black.
What is that?
They have both said things
Yes.
that were questionable
Yes.
and unsavory.
Yes.
But when you start looking at facts, it's like, Biden, you done dropped the ball, brother.
I love that. Yeah, and just before this, the reporter had started just like how he goes, okay, focus group, 6 people. Who are you voting for this fall? And the first guy goes, hey, I don't even want to say his name. I don't want to say his name, but I'm voting for Trump. And the woman next to him is like, oh, how could you? Then she goes, Biden. And it goes through the group. And eventually you get 3 out of 6 are going for Trump and 3 out of 6 Biden. And the reporter just kind of stops and he's like, we're an even split. I didn't see that one coming. And he's like, have you been paying attention to anything? But they're just the shock, the jaw drop. He had a hard time coping with that one. And yeah, the spokesman for Trump on this panel, they were pretty articulate. They're like, they use the African American community as their soapbox to stand on and make promises just to get us to come out and vote. And then once they're in office, they disappear because they don't actually care about Black people. And the line here from Eric Abinante was, how could you vote for Trump is quickly shifting to how could you vote for the senile guy? So then I will add the senile racist guy. I'll say it. Biden is a lifelong, totally awkward racist. But
yeah,
that was it.
Nothing illustrates what I keep seeing in these videos better than Trump pulling up to the Chick-fil-A in Atlanta and buying like 50 milkshakes. And the same week, Biden did like a highly produced cut up video of like a clearly uncomfortable African-American family eating like fried chicken in a kitchen with him.
He's like patting the little boy's hand. Yeah.
I mean,
like,
the kid's like, oh, what are we doing?
Cringe.
Here,
Calling them all corn pop.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, corn pop.
Yeah. So there
Classic.
we go. Twilight Zone shift happening for the Daily Show over there.
Yeah. Tom.
All right, Tom.
What you got?
Bring us home.
Well, if you read the Loop this morning, you saw the story about the military base down in Texas. And this has been ongoing. I think the slide might have even been an old slide that they were using, showing of who is terrorist groups. And they go from like international terrorist groups, switch to the next slide. And they had pro-life groups. And the pro-life groups included Operation Rescue, which is a fine organization. Not everybody loves it in the movement, but I've always thought they did good work. If you have a pro-life license plate, and then they have National Right to Life. And I never want to disparage another pro-life group, except National Right to Life was an 800-pound gorilla like in the 80s and 90s. Now it's kind of like a 200-pound gorilla. It's more known to be tied to the Republican Party than it is to be tied to the life cause in a sense. The state groups, a lot of them are good, but on the national level. So it just struck me as odd, like, and also I was kind of insulted the Catholic vote wasn't listed on this site.
Yeah.
So I have talked to some ADF attorneys about possibly suing.
It's okay. The SPLC will have us on their terror watch list.
But you wonder how slides like this get created and how the federal government then endorses it basically by showing it.
Well, they check out Southern Poverty Law Center, Tom.
Well, Southern Poverty Law Center, which I'm very familiar with, of course, because they were instrumental in when I was working at Family Research Council to send a shooter to Family Research Council, trying to kill me and my colleagues. But
I joke about that, but they use that as a source for these.
I know,
things.
And they continue to.
Yeah,
Donald Trump separated them from it, but they just brought him back. That they still have credibility is just incredible. But Media Research Center looked at a reporter, the terrorism reporter for the USA Today, and he easily defines right-wing terrorism, much like that slide that we just saw. If you're pro-life, if you're Catholic, devout Catholic, And then he goes on to defend Hamas and other international terrorists. Hamas, which of course brutally killed a bunch of Israeli citizens just last year. And this is the thinking of the media, though, that we are the problem. And that's why I think the Democrats' messaging on, be it Project 2025 or MAGA Republicans, or using terms like that, is that they honestly think that everybody else thinks the same way that they do, that anybody believes is pro-family, goes to church, is pro-life, is the problem, and not the people who want to steal your children away.
Yeah. It reminds me too of Erica. I don't think we ended up saying it in this episode, but the treatment of, was it Rachel Brovard? Bovard, yeah, where they called her the nursemaid.
The nursemaid, yeah. So Rachel Bovard is one of my heroes, and she was speaking at NATCON where Tom was just talking about it, and she had a great speech. I mean, very erudite, really articulate woman. She had a baby 4 weeks ago, and at the beginning of her speech, she thanks her husband and her mother for taking care of the baby while she's giving the speech. And so the headline is like "Nursemaid for Conservatives," and I was like, "Nursemaids of the world, unite! I am proud to be a nursemaid with you." They don't even know
I'm good friends with Rachel. She's a fellow upstate New Yorker, and because we joked about this, and she's the one who actually got me on the panel at NatCon. She was instrumental in putting a lot of it together. But she joked with a few of us afterwards that thank goodness they didn't know that she had 2 sons. So here she is perpetuating the patriarchy.
She's breeding the patriarchy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
it reminds me of Josh too. Like Josh was like, I really hope that some left-leaning 26-year-old writes a hit piece on me when I die, like about the climate hoax denier. Jim Inhofe dies. Like Josh Mercer.
Badge of honor, man.
Right, exactly.
Badge of honor.
Sorry, Tom, what were you saying?
I'm just thinking now, maybe I'll write that hit piece on Josh before he dies.
That would make him so happy.
Just imagining like Tom on a burner account, like writing hit piece. Josh leaves the show for a day. It's open season, baby. You get to go after him on whatever you want.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, this was a fun one. I think we send people out on a high note for the weekend here. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you want to help out the program, subscribe, like this episode, share us around. Goes a long way. Leave us a review. Apple Podcasts and Spotify are great as well. If you want to email me, loopcast@catholicvote.org is where you can do so. I want to hear from you guys. If you want to support the program, best way to do so, become a champion, become a monthly donor. You can do that at catholicvote.org/champions. That's the best way to help us out. Shout out to all the champions here today. It's the only way we can do what we can do. But yeah, I'm going to talk to someone from Project 2025. I'm calling my shot, and it's going to be awesome.
It's all you. Hey, and just a teaser, 2 weeks from today, Mary Margaret Olahan will be on Loopcast. So make sure you tune in for that one live. It'll be really fun.
Legend. And shout out Dom Higgy with Josh's obituary saying Josh, lover of women's sports. Or should we say like Josh, lover of women's sports and soccer? Might be a good one.
Well, isn't that kind of saying the same thing?
Oh man. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with us today. We appreciate it. St. Thomas More, Our Lady of Guadalupe, St. Fidelis. Pray for us. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining the show. We'll see you next time. Peace.